I've always been fascinated by the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of science. The story of Kesi, a genetically modified white gorilla, is one that has stayed with me for years. The idea that a creature born in a lab, rescued as an infant, could form such a powerful, lasting bond. It challenges everything we think we know about memory, love, and the connections between species. It's a story of a goodbye experienced in its purest form. On one of the most beautiful spring mornings, the kind where cherry blossom petals danced in the air, something extraordinary happened. The Rehabilitation Center's security cameras captured it all, but no technology could truly explain the miracle that unfolded. It wasn't just animal behavior. It was proof that love knows no boundaries, and that memory is incredibly powerful. The white gorilla, seeing the elderly woman in a wheelchair, unlocked a lock that had been closed for years. The security team aimed their weapons, but Kesi had only one goal, a goal more valuable than anything else. How could a gorilla never forget something he learned years ago? How could he act so gently despite his enormous strength? And how could he become so deeply attached to a human? The answer lies hidden in the story of a bond that even science struggles to explain. It begins with Emma Carter, a woman who dedicated 42 years of her life to working with primates. She showed them a compassion that, sadly, some humans couldn't. But nothing in her life was as much of a turning point as the raid she made on that laboratory. Everything changed that night, both for her and for a 5-month-old white baby gorilla. The year was 2006, and controversial experiments in genetic engineering were gaining momentum. Emma, working as a researcher for a private animal rights organization, had been watching a particular laboratory she'd suspected for months. That night, she finally managed to get inside, and what she saw shook her to her core. In a small cage in the middle of a cold, sterile room lay a gorilla infant with fur as white as snow. All the other gorillas in the surrounding cages were dark-colored, natural-looking. But this infant was different, defying the laws of nature with its perfect whiteness. When she looked at the files, the truth became clear. This was one of the first genetically modified gorilla infants. It wasn't albino. This was the result of deliberate intervention. Scientists had tampered with its genetics to display it as a rare species, perhaps even to sell it to wealthy collectors. But right now, that tiny being was living without a mother, without love, only as an experimental object. Emma felt something break inside her, and at that moment she made a decision. She couldn't leave this infant there. That night, risking her career, her freedom, perhaps even her life, she took Kesi out of there. She named him Kesi herself, meaning hope in an ancient language. He was hope for Emma. He was proof that humanity could still do good, that love was stronger than science. The first days weren't easy. Kesi had been traumatized. He cried through the nights, trembled in Emma's arms. But Emma didn't give up. She fed him by warming milk, put him to sleep singing lullabies for hours, and slowly gained his trust by showing him she was there every time he woke up. As months passed, the bond between them grew stronger. As Kesi grew, his white fur shone even brighter. He didn't just develop physically. His intelligence, his ability to empathize, and his loving gaze amazed everyone, as if he was now receiving back all the love he had lost in that laboratory cell, multiplied. When he turned 3, Kesi was already too big to climb on Emma's shoulder. But he still came to her side every morning, rested his huge head on her knees, and waited for her hands to wander through his fur. This ritual was the most sacred moment for Emma, because those moments were the time for a silent conversation they both shared. Emma taught Kesi simple things: how to peel fruit, how to play games, even how to open a simple lock. She had shown him this last skill as a fun activity. A metal lock, small buttons turned in the right sequence. Kesi thought it was a game, but actually it was one of the most important gifts Emma had given him: the ability to understand the idea of freedom. Years passed. When Kesi turned 10, he was already over 200 kilograms. His white fur literally glowed in the sunlight, while his amber eyes carried deep wisdom. Emma could no longer keep him at home. This would be dangerous and wrong, but the solution she found was the best for him. The local rehabilitation center agreed to accept Kesi. This was a professional facility designed for injured animals in need of protection, with large areas. Kesi would be safe there, cared for by experts, and able to move freely in a large area. The day she took him there, Emma felt something tear inside her. Kesi looked at her. There was an understanding in those big eyes, as if he knew, as if he understood that Emma thought this was best for him. And as she left him, Emma stroked his head one last time, whispered in his ear one last time, "I will always love you, Kesi. You're my son." And Kesi touched Emma's face one last time. Those giant fingers touched hers as if making a promise that he would never forget her. After that day, Emma visited him every week. According to the center's rules, she couldn't make direct contact, but just watching him from behind the bars was enough. Every time Kesi saw her, he would stand up, place his hands on the bars, and look at her. Such a look that it was as if he was speaking, as if saying, "Mom, you're here. Everything is..." Time was merciless, especially toward Emma. When she reached 65, the doctor's diagnosis was merciless: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. I remember reading about it later: motor neuron disease. Within a year, Emma could no longer walk. She was confined to a wheelchair. Her speech became difficult, and even putting words together required enormous effort. But her mind remained sharp, her feelings deep. That, I think, was the most painful part: to understand everything, to feel everything, but to be unable to fully express anything. Visiting Kesi became impossible. Her health simply wouldn't allow it. Months passed without seeing him, and the absence began to consume her. She knew her time was running out, and she wanted to see him one last time. Just one last time. Her sister Sarah understood. She contacted the rehabilitation center, got special permission, and one spring morning, on a beautiful day when cherry blossoms danced in the air, she took Emma to the center in her wheelchair. As they moved along the main path, people gave Emma pitying looks, but she didn't notice. Her attention was fixed on one thing. In the distance, in a large outdoor area, stood Kesi, like a white giant. Sarah slowly pushed the chair toward the garden. The spring sun warmed Emma's face, and cherry blossoms landed in her hair, but she only wanted to see him, Kesi, her son. They stopped just before the bars. Kesi had his back turned, sitting on a large rock. Emma tried to call him, but words wouldn't come, only rasping sounds. Tears streamed from her eyes. To be this close and have to turn back without seeing him was unbearable. Sarah touched her shoulder. "Let me call him," she said softly. But at that moment, as if by a miracle, Kesi turned his head. Maybe he felt the vibration, or maybe his instincts whispered something to him. When that huge head turned, his amber eyes locked onto Emma. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. All the noise in the world ceased. There was only the woman and the gorilla, mother and son reunited after years. Kesi slowly stood. His massive body, over 200 kilograms, gained a strange grace. He walked toward the bars, purpose in every step. He was coming to Emma. He had seen her, and he remembered her. When he reached the bars, he stopped. His hands gripped the metal. His head bowed, his eyes still on Emma. Then he made a sound, deep, human-like, as if in pain. One of those characteristic sounds gorillas make when they're sad. Sarah brought the chair closer. Now only a meter separated Kesi and Emma. The bars were the only obstacle. Emma tried to reach out with her trembling hand, but she didn't have the strength. When Kesi understood, he extended his own giant hand through the bars. His fingers touched Emma's. That touch was like electricity. 10 years. She hadn't been able to fully touch him for 10 years. Now those giant fingers were intertwined with hers. Warm, soft, familiar. Kesi's fingers began to tremble. Was he crying? Could gorillas cry? Emma didn't know. But she knew they were both feeling the same pain. A word fell from her mouth. Kai. That huge head bowed even further, leaning against the bars as if trying to hug Emma. And then something strange happened. Kesi pulled his hand back, turned his head slightly to the side, examined the lock on the edge of the bars, and took action. That simple lock mechanism Emma had taught him as a game years ago. 3 buttons, when turned in a specific sequence, would open it. A simple but effective system designed to prevent visitors from accidentally opening the door. But Kesi remembered it. He turned the first button right, the second left, the third right. A click. The lock opened. Sarah's breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. The security guards noticed on the monitors and panicked. The alarm sounded, but Emma wasn't afraid. She was looking into Kesi's eyes, and there was no danger there. Only love. Kesi slowly pushed the door. The metal bars creaked open, and that giant gorilla, for the first time in 10 years, stepped outside freely. Security teams came running, tranquilizer darts in their hands, some with guns. "Get back!" someone shouted. "The animal has gotten loose." But Kesi didn't even look at them. He only looked at Emma, and, with slow steps, as carefully as if approaching something breakable, he moved toward her. Sarah had frozen behind the chair, unable to move. Emma tried to give her a signal with her hand, trying to say, with difficulty, "Let him." Sarah hadn't understood. What? Let him. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She didn't want to leave her sister here alone with this giant animal. But when she saw the determination in Emma's eyes, she slowly backed away. One of the security team members shouted, "No, get away from there. This is very dangerous." I've seen many things in my years working with historical documents, but The story of Emma and Kesi. It's something that stays with you. They say that in his amber eyes there was an understanding, an acceptance, as if he knew Emma wouldn't be with him much longer. Sarah turned to them with a stern look. "Stop," she said. "Just wait." Kesi was now right in front of Emma, his giant shadow covering her. Sunlight was breaking on his white fur as if creating a halo around him. Slowly, very slowly, he crouched down, now on his knees. Their faces were almost at the same level. Kwesi's giant hand reached out. His fingers touched Emma's face. So gentle, so delicate, as if touching a child. He caressed her cheek, took a cherry blossom petal from her hair, examined it, then gently placed it on the ground. He rested his huge head on Emma's knees. Everyone around froze. Security teams, visitors, center staff. No one was even breathing, because what they saw there wasn't just an animal's behavior. It was the meeting of two souls, a mother and son's farewell after years. Emma raised her trembling hand and put it on Kesi's head, feeling the warm, soft, familiar white fur between her fingers. Tears continued to flow from her eyes, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was gratitude, thankfulness. While Kesi kept his head on Emma's knees, he made a strange sound, almost a human-like whimpering that gorillas make only in the deepest emotional moments, as if saying, "Mom, you're here. I missed you. I never forgot you." Words fell from Emma's mouth, difficult, choppy, but they came from her heart. "I love you, Kesi." Kesi, lifting his head slightly, looked at her. There were no tears in those amber eyes, but there was an understanding, an acceptance, as if he knew she wouldn't be with him much longer. His giant hand reached for the wheelchair armrest. He carefully examined the metal edges, then placed his hand on Emma's hand. Their hands, there under the sun in that moment when cherry blossoms slowly fell around them, joined together. Emma realized Kesi was being careful not to hit the edge of the wheelchair. Every movement was calculated, controlled, because he knew she was fragile and he wanted to protect her. Minutes passed. No one interfered. The security teams had lowered their weapons because now they could see this wasn't a threat. This was love. The center's director, Dr. Alan Thompson, stepped forward from the crowd. He was watching Emma and Kesi from beneath his glasses. His eyes welled up. He had worked with animals for so many years, but he had never witnessed such a bond. "The most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed," he said, his voice trembling. "Come on, buddy. Let Emma rest." Kesi lifted his head and looked at the doctor, then turned back to Emma. There was hesitation in his eyes, as if he knew that if he left her, he would never see her again. And perhaps he was right. Emma, gathering her last strength, gave him a signal, gently pushing him away with her hand. "Go," she whispered. "Be well." Kesi placed his giant hand on Emma's hand one last time, held it tightly as if trying to transfer all the love coming from within him with that touch, then slowly stood up, but his eyes were still on her. He took a few steps back, then stopped, turned around, looked at Emma one last time, and in that look was everything: gratitude, love, farewell, and a promise. A silent promise that he would never forget her. Dr. Thompson slowly guided Kesi back inside the bars. Kesi wasn't interested in the fruits. He only looked back at Emma. Even as he walked away step by step, his head was turned. His eyes didn't leave her. When the door closed, Kesi stood there, leaned against the bars, and stayed like that for a long time, motionless, silent, just watching Emma. Sarah moved behind the wheelchair. "Should we go?" she asked, her voice still trembling. Emma nodded her head slightly. Yes, it was time to go. I've always been struck by stories of interspecies connection, but the tale of Emma and Kesi, it stays with you. A woman and a gorilla, bound by a love that defied language, species, and every conceivable barrier. It reminds me that the deepest bonds often arise in the most unexpected places. That day, when the chair began to turn, signaling the end of their visit, Kesi made a sound I can only describe as a long, pain-filled cry. It was the kind of call gorillas reserve for the most profound moments. A mother's call or a son's call. As they moved toward the center's exit, the people around them silently made way, still under the spell of what they'd witnessed. Some were crying. Others simply looked on in shock, recognizing that what they had just seen transcended normal animal behavior. It was, by all accounts, a miracle. Back at home, Sarah made tea for Emma, but she couldn't bring herself to drink it. She felt utterly empty, as if a part of herself had remained there with Kesi. That night, lying in bed, Emma gazed at the ceiling, her thoughts drifting back to the day she first saw Kesi, that tiny white infant, and how she had taken him into her arms, making a promise. "I will protect you. I will love you." And she had kept that promise every day, every moment, doing what was best for him. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah brought news of Kesi, assuring Emma that he was doing well. But Sarah didn't mention that every evening at sunset, Kesi would come to the bars, his eyes fixed on the last place Emma had stood. 2 months later, Emma woke up one morning struggling to breathe. The disease was taking its course. Sarah called for an ambulance, but Emma refused to go to the hospital. She wanted to remain at home, in peace. That night, as she lay in bed, she looked out the window. The moon was full, its white light bathing the room. And at that moment, a strange feeling washed over her, as if Kesi were right beside her, his giant hand gently touching hers once more. She closed her eyes and imagined him, his white fur, his amber eyes, his large, gentle hands. She recalled that last perfect day, when cherry blossoms danced in the air, illuminated by the radiant sun. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for letting me love you, Kesi." And that night, Emma fell asleep in peace. The next morning, Sarah couldn't wake her. Emma was gone, but there was a smile on her face, a peaceful, happy expression, as if she had just experienced a beautiful dream. When Dr. Thompson heard the news, he wept. Emma had not only saved an animal's life, but she had given him a life filled with love and meaning. But how would they tell Kesi? How do you explain death to a gorilla, especially the death of the person he loved most? But somehow Kesi already knew. That morning, he didn't come to the bars as usual. For the first time in days, he broke his morning routine, choosing instead to sit in the farthest corner of his area, head bowed, motionless, as if in mourning. Dr. Thompson made a decision. He asked Sarah for Emma's favorite shawl, and one morning, in the early hours, he left it in Kesi's area. When Kesi saw the shawl, he froze. He approached cautiously, smelling it, and at that moment his giant body trembled. He grasped the shawl, brought it to his face, and inhaled deeply for a long, long time. It was Emma's scent, lavender and daisy. Kesi had never forgotten it. He gently pressed the shawl to his chest, bowed his head. From that day on, Kesi slept with that shawl every night. In the morning, he would take it with him, protecting it as if it were a treasure. It was his way of maintaining his connection with Emma. Months passed. Kesi slowly returned to normal, eating, playing, living. But every evening at sunset, he would take that shawl with him and come to the bars. He would sit there, waiting, and perhaps, in a way, Emma was always there, in every cherry blossom petal, in every ray of sunlight. Emma was in Kesi's heart, just as Kesi was in Emma's heart. A year later, the Rehabilitation Centre erected a special monument in Emma's memory, made of white marble. It was a small but meaningful monument depicting a woman and a gorilla hand in hand. Beneath it was an Indian, Emma Carter, 1964 to 2026. She taught that love knows no language, species, or barrier. On the day of the monument's unveiling, Sarah was there, and Kesi was there too, watching silently from behind the bars. When the ceremony ended, Sarah went to Kesi's side and looked at him. His amber eyes gave her a sad but grateful look. "You loved my sister very much, didn't you?" Sarah said, tears welling up. Kesi bowed his head slightly, as if confirming. "She loved you very much too," Sarah said. "Know that?" And at that moment, Kesi made a strange sound, soft, sweet, sad, one of those rare sounds with which gorillas express their deepest feelings. Years passed. Kesi lived a long and happy life. Grey strands appeared among his white fur, but that sparkle in his eyes never disappeared, and he carried Emma's shawl with him until he died. One autumn morning, Kesi peacefully passed away. Veterinarians said his heart had simply stopped, but the caretakers believed something else. He finally went to be with Emma, they said. They buried Kesi right next to Emma's monument and inscribed on it, Kesi, 2006 to 2023. He knew what love was, and he never forgot it. That night, the full moon illuminated both graves, Emma and Kesi, mother and son, two souls, finally together again. And even though it wasn't the season, cherry blossom petals danced in the wind, as if Emma and Kesi were somehow still showing their love. It's strange how certain stories linger, isn't it? This one, about two people finding solace in each other's company, has stayed with me. They were together, and sometimes that's all that matters.